There's no job for someone with such low education. What can a person without any real learning do? My boss laughed mockingly at me, a woman who grew up in a single-parent household. I had been putting in hard work all this time, driven by the memory of my mom who had raised me alone. He never acknowledged my efforts and even belittled my mom. When my mom passed away, my boss not only spoke cold words but also undermined me. I'm Sarah, a 28-year-old woman working in a small to medium-sized business, raised by a single parent. I joined the company right after high school as a part-timer and now work here full-time. Despite the company being relatively small, it employs a significant number of people. Initially starting as a part-timer, I fought hard as if my life depended on it. Thanks to my dedication, I earned recognition from my boss and became a full-time employee in my third year. Even after becoming full-time, I continued to work diligently, not wanting to disappoint those who believed in me. By age 25, I was handling more responsibilities than my peers and gaining trust within the company. With decent pay and bonuses, I could take care of my mom and live comfortably. One day, my direct boss retired and a new boss, Christopher, was assigned. It was sad to part with the boss who had nurtured and recognized me. I felt a slight anxiety about getting along with the new boss, but my hard work spoke for itself. Above all, my retiring boss assured me he would speak highly of me to the new boss, easing my worries. On Christopher's first day, I was called into a conference room, expecting to discuss our working relationship. Instead, Christopher threw unexpected words at me. Are you Taylor, the high school graduate from a single-parent household who started part-time and worked your way up? It shocked me to be confronted with my background out of nowhere. Christopher's tone was intimidating, judgmental. My first impression of this new boss was not favorable, but knowing we would work together, I aimed to keep things professional. Yes, I am Taylor. I look forward to working with you, I replied with a smile, trying to deflect the comment. Uncertain about Christopher's character, I resolved to handle the situation calmly. However, Christopher continued with unkind remarks. A single-parent upbringing, huh? You probably can't handle this job. You didn't even go to college. What can an uneducated person like you do? I was taken aback by his harsh words. I was stunned. It was true that I came from a single-parent household and had only graduated from high school, but I had consistently performed well in my department. I may not have a higher education, but I've been delivering results in my job, I told Christopher. I have a high school diploma, but I believe my work speaks for itself. I acknowledge my limitations, but I am still achieving good results, I explained to Christopher. I noticed that, however, your previous boss seemed to favor you quite a bit, he said with a crude, lecherous look. Perhaps you used some seductive tactics to get ahead. Christopher's baseless accusation stunned me. That's not true. My previous boss mentored me to help me perform my job better. There was nothing inappropriate, I insisted, feeling insulted by Christopher's insinuations about someone who had supported and guided me. I couldn't comprehend why Christopher would attack me so harshly, but it seemed to be his nature. The prospect of working under such a boss troubled me deeply. Christopher smirked at me, making it clear he didn't hold me in high regard. Despite his disdain, I resolved to prove myself. From what I've heard, this boss believes in meritocracy, I thought. If I could demonstrate my value to him, there would be no grounds for further criticism. Feeling there was no other recourse, I decided to turn Christopher's bias into motivation and redouble my efforts. As I returned to the office from fieldwork, Christopher immediately accosted me with raised voice. Hey, where have you been? He barked. I was out on scheduled fieldwork today, I replied, perplexed by his aggression. Ignoring my explanation, Christopher marched over. You're incompetent at your job. Just do these menial tasks. Organize these documents, he commanded, thrusting a towering stack of papers into my hands. It wasn't my responsibility, and I was pressed for time, but I couldn't disobey. Reluctantly, I began sorting through the documents under Christopher's satisfied gaze. Perhaps sensing my compliance, he began heaping more administrative duties on me from that day forward. Whenever I attempted to focus on my core responsibilities, Christopher accused me of neglecting tasks or chastised me for minor errors. He even belittled me, saying, "You can't handle this because you're from a single-parent household." Until then, my job satisfaction stemmed from delivering results and earning recognition within the company. I had been managing to support Mom and myself without complaint, but now the stress was overwhelming every single day. Quitting my job would worry Mom, and I couldn't bear that thought. So, despite my desperation, I continued working diligently. Then one day, Mom approached me with a request. Despite my financial support, she didn't intend to depend on me forever. Considering my future marriage prospects, she wanted to contribute and save some money for herself. I couldn't refuse her, so I approached the company. Luckily, they were hiring an office worker at the time, which seemed like a perfect fit, unrelated to my department. Hoping to avoid dealing with my difficult boss, I arranged an interview for Mom, and she was successfully hired. Mom began her new role as an office worker at the same company where I worked. She found joy in the comfortable environment, enjoying her daily routine. However, a week after she started, Christopher called me aside. "Your mom got hired as an office worker," he sneered. "Is that short woman the one who raised you, the uneducated idiot?" Christopher always wore a disdainful expression, mocking not just me but now my mom too. I couldn't fathom how he knew about Mom's employment without my mention. The stress I felt more than doubled. Hearing Mom spoken ill of hurt more than any insult directed at myself. Above all, I worried endlessly about whether Christopher would confront Mom directly. I didn't want Mom to feel distressed, but contrary to my concerns, everything seemed to be going smoothly with her at work. Christopher occasionally made snide remarks, but Mom, a strong woman who raised me single-handedly, seemed unfazed. She brushed off Christopher's comments like a child's insults, laughing them off. Witnessing her resilience relieved me. She appeared unaffected by Christopher's attempts to unsettle her. Even after that incident, Mom continued to thrive in her new workplace environment, paying no mind to Christopher's remarks. Then, one day, everything changed abruptly when Mom collapsed and had to be rushed to the hospital by ambulance. Thankfully, her life was not in danger, but she needed hospitalization for some time. I decided to take time off from work to care for Mom during her recovery. When I informed Christopher of my situation, his reaction was outrageous. "You plan to take time off for something so trivial? You must not take your job seriously," he scoffed, denying my request for leave. "I'll use the paid leave that I haven't taken yet. I'm the only one available to care for Mom," I asserted, despite Christopher's objections. Permission for the leave had already been granted by someone higher up than Christopher, who understood the gravity of the situation and supported my decision to be with Mom during this critical time. I had rarely taken leave before, but no matter how I explained it, Christopher wouldn't listen. "It's not about that, just leave an old woman whose life is short anyway," he callously remarked. His thoughtless comment made my blood boil. How could he say something like that when I was telling him about Mom collapsing? I had endured his behavior until now, but I reached my breaking point. "I can't work under someone like you anymore," I blurted out, unable to hold back any longer. I knew it might inconvenience others, but since Christopher had arrived, I'd been relegated to menial tasks. With no motivation left, I quit on the spot despite Christopher's surprised attempt to dissuade me. "You don't have to go that far," he said, fearful of the consequences of my resignation, but my decision was final. With enough savings to sustain myself for a while, I ignored Christopher's protests and focused on caring for Mom. After things settled down with Mom's care, I considered re-entering the workforce. While I initially thought about returning to similar work, my confidence had grown. Inspired by lessons in business management from my retired former boss, I took a bold step. I started my own company. I wanted to wait until things stabilized before telling Mom about my new venture. About a year passed, and my company was starting to find its footing when Mom's health suddenly deteriorated, requiring hospitalization once again. Balancing the responsibilities of caring for Mom and running my business was challenging, but I managed without taking any time for myself. Another year passed, and the company was thriving, offering reassurance of its stability. Though Mom's health hadn't improved, I wanted to ease her worries and planned to discuss it with her soon. Then suddenly Mom passed away. It felt unreal. A truly unexpected event. As her only child, I had no other family to rely on, so I had to quickly prepare to say goodbye. Suppressing my tears, I made necessary arrangements. Despite not having worked long as a clerk, many people from the company where Mom was well-liked offered to attend her funeral. Perhaps it was Mom's warm personality that drew them, but their presence was a comfort. On the day of the funeral, more people came than I had anticipated, a testament to Mom's popularity. Amid the pain of losing her, I felt pride seeing how many lives Mom had touched. However, as the funeral was concluding, one attendee caught my attention. "Long time no see. So that old woman finally kicked the bucket, huh?" I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Christopher standing there, his words infuriating. Though he may have had some prior interaction with Mom, I hadn't invited him to the funeral and couldn't fathom why he had come. I would never have invited someone like him to Mom's funeral. My old boss smirked at my stunned expression, the same disdainful look he wore when belittling our single-parent household. Unpleasant memories flooded back, and I could only glare at Christopher. Approaching me, Christopher handed over a bunch of flowers. "Here, some flowers. She may not have been able to give her daughter a proper education, but at least I can do this much." His words cut deep, delivered at such an inappropriate moment. I wanted to yell in anger but restrained myself. I couldn't let Christopher spoil Mom's funeral or inconvenience the other mourners. With a heavy heart, I accepted the flowers in silence. To my disbelief, the flowers looked like they had been hastily picked off the street. Had Christopher come all this way just to mock me like this? As Christopher saw my expression, his grin widened maliciously. That moment, my suppressed emotions erupted. I couldn't remain silent after hearing such disrespect toward my beloved Mom. "If this is how you truly feel about me, then I understand. In that case, I'll have to cancel our business deal with your company." Christopher stared blankly, clearly perplexed. "Deal? What are you talking about?" My former boss looked clueless, so I calmly explained the implications of my words. I had been asked by colleagues and seniors in the sales department to sign numerous contracts, though I want to terminate them all. "I need to reconsider our relationship with a company that employs someone like you," I declared firmly. Initially, my former boss didn't take me seriously. However, the next day, he sent a formal notice to Christopher's company. Christopher's face went pale upon receiving it. He clearly hadn't expected that I had started a successful business. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Christopher came to apologize promptly. I'm sorry," he muttered, his apology lacking sincerity. My anger simmered. "Sorry? Do you think that's enough? You insulted my mom while she was alive, gave me only menial tasks, and what about the funeral?" I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Christopher appeared speechless while the president accompanying him apologized deeply. "I am so sorry for not intervening," he said, tears welling in his eyes. His genuine remorse touched me deeply, considering how much he had supported me in the past. Out of respect for the president and his sincere apology, I decided to reconsider continuing the business relationship. As we discussed next steps, Christopher visibly relaxed. "I'm relieved. Let's let bygones be bygones and move forward together," Christopher said with an awkward smile, extending his hand for a handshake. His assumption of reconciliation was premature. "You're fired, Christopher," the president announced abruptly, shocking us all. "What? Fired? Why?" I apologized, and we're continuing the deal, Christopher protested, disbelief written all over his face. The president remained resolute. "I've decided to terminate your employment knowing I will not continue this business relationship under these terms." I'd agreed to proceed only out of respect for the president. "I want you to understand, I will never forgive you, no matter what you say," I asserted firmly. Christopher fell silent, visibly affected by my words. "It's the consequence of your own actions," the president interjected dismissively, leaving with a dejected Christopher in tow. The next day, it became apparent that my former boss had indeed been fired from the company. Shortly afterward, I received a resentful call from Christopher, lamenting the loss of his job and the challenges of finding new employment at his age. "You've ruined my life. Take responsibility for what's happened," he shouted angrily over the phone. In response, I made an unexpected proposal to the furious Christopher. "How about I hire you at my company? I can't offer much in terms of pay, but it seems you're out of options because of me." Upon hearing this, Christopher exploded with emotion and abruptly hung up. The idea of being employed by someone he had ridiculed must have been a deep humiliation for him. I didn't expect him to accept the offer. A month later, however, unable to secure another job, Christopher reached out to me and asked to be hired. It surprised me, but I decided to give him a chance. Now, in a role reversal, I made Christopher experience the same menial tasks and lack of responsibility that I had endured. "Why do I have to do these menial tasks? Anyone could do this," he complained bitterly. Ignoring his protests, I kept him on simple tasks, reminding him, "If you can't handle these basic duties, you'll be dismissed for incompetence." The boss's orders are absolute. There's no room for defiance. Christopher appeared downtrodden, a stark contrast to his arrogant demeanor in his previous role. Eventually, unable to bear the humiliation, he quit the company. Reflecting on this experience, I realized the irony of Christopher facing what he had inflicted upon me. Treating others as he had treated me led to his downfall, a simple truth he failed to grasp. Meanwhile, my company continues to grow steadily and thrive. I've learned that persistent effort yields results, whereas without it, success remains modest at best. Whether one ends up like Christopher or not ultimately depends on understanding this fundamental lesson. My heart sank as my mother-in-law brandished a knife, her words slicing through me like blades. You not only demand our son to handle household chores and childcare, but now you're also after our finances. Get out of this house, you lazy freeloader. You barely bring in $700. A chill ran down my spine as I stood there, sweat beading on my forehead. Despite pouring all my energy into managing the household and looking after the children in lieu of my unemployed husband, I found myself confronted with accusations and hostility. It was a crushing moment, a culmination of frustration and despair. I knew then that I had reached my breaking point. I left the chores unfinished, scooped up my child, and made a beeline for my parents' house. I'm Emily, 23 years old, residing with my husband, our little one, and my mother-in-law. My mind wandered back to the beginning. Richard, my high school's golden boy, a star on the soccer field and beloved student president. His return to our small town after landing a job was met with adoration from everyone. When he approached me, I was taken aback. After a few dates, we dove into a serious relationship. Even now, as adults, he remained my handsome, envy-inducing boyfriend. After graduating from vocational school, I discovered I was pregnant. It wasn't the typical order of events, but I held onto the belief that I could still carve out a happy life with my child and Richard. Our home echoed with discussions about our future post-marriage. How about moving into my parents' place after we tie the knot? Richard suggested. Why? I envisioned just the three of us, our child included, I countered. But won't that be expensive? If we stay with my parents, money won't be a constant worry. With both of us working, we could afford our own place, couldn't we? Well, about that, my income this month is pretty dismal. How bad? I pressed. Less than $1,000. What? How is that possible? I thought you were working at an IT company. I quit. Now I'm trying my luck at the casino and picking up part-time gigs. The casino? Why would you do that? My disbelief hung heavy in the air. It turned out he had quit his job after only a month. If you're okay handling all the expenses, I'm fine with fitting an apartment, he stated matter-of-factly. His detached demeanor left me feeling uneasy, questioning if I was the only one truly invested in our fresh start together. Sensing my apprehension, he grasped both of my hands firmly. It's just temporary until I secure another job. I'll make you happy, Emily. I'll take care of all the household chores and child rearing until then. Trusting in his assurances, we exchanged vows. Our journey together began in his parents' home. Following a safe delivery, I pledged to give my all for my son. Both Richard and my mother-in-law appeared content, and I eagerly anticipated our shared journey ahead. However, even after our son was born, Richard neglected his responsibilities, opting to spend his days at the casino. After the casino again, what about helping with the household chores and caring for our child? I confronted him about his broken promise. Don't you dare tell me what to do. Richard's sudden outburst caught me off guard. Perplexed by the sudden tension, my mother-in-law intervened, drawn by the commotion. What's all this noise? It's just that I'm overwhelmed with work, and she's asking for assistance with chores and childcare, I explained. What? That's a wife's duty. My mother-in-law's response left me stunned. Richard hadn't informed his mother about quitting his job. Instead, he painted me as an unreasonable wife, burdening him with household chores and childcare. Initially, my mother-in-law, who had been kind, grew to resent me after buying into Richard's narrative. Despite his sporadic part-time work and frequent trips to the casino, where he barely earned $700, Richard persisted in his fruitless attempts to double his earnings, often losing everything. I shouldered the majority of our living expenses, which made our lives increasingly challenging. Unable to bear the financial strain any longer, I reluctantly re-entered the workforce. After dropping off our son at the childcare center, I was fortunate to secure a job as a dental hygienist rather swiftly. However, upon returning home each evening, I was greeted by my mother-in-law's tirades. "What time do you call this? This isn't playtime. You're a parent, yet all you do is gallivant around. Get dinner started now." In her frustration, she slammed the newspaper she was holding onto the floor, a common occurrence whenever she was upset. My mother-in-law had a volatile temperament, her mood shifting at the slightest provocation. The unpredictability of her reactions left me feeling powerless. Juggling the responsibilities of caring for my young son, working and managing household chores left me mentally and physically drained. Unable to endure it any longer, I resolved to confront Richard once again. I intercepted him early in the morning before he headed out to the casino. "Listen, I've reached my breaking point. Can't you lend a hand with our child, even just a little?" "What?" "Like I said, I'm swamped. I'm gearing up to find a new job. You get that, right? Or would you prefer I stayed unemployed forever? Imagine the father of your child, Douglas. If you're not happy, just follow orders." "But we're barely getting by as it is. I'm covering all our food expenses with my savings, you know. Have you any idea how costly diapers are? You claim to be earning at the casino, yet you never contribute any money." Most of our living expenses were covered by my earnings. Initially, my mother-in-law handled the utility bills, but recently she began requesting $500 per month, forcing me to dip into my savings. Even our grocery bills were eating away at my dwindling funds, leaving me with little left. All I had to rely on was money I had saved from a part-time job during my student days. "Enough. How dare you talk back to me? After all, you're the one who moved into my house." Richard, typically gentle, underwent a stark transformation when money or casino matters were involved. His outburst drew my mother-in-law into the room. "What's all this now? Is your wife causing trouble again?" she interjected. "Yeah, she is. She's insisting I do housework, look after the child, and foot the living expenses. And on top of that, What audacity you have, Richard. You ought to be heading to work." "Thanks, I'll handle it from here," Richard declared loudly as he stepped outside. Mother-in-law's eyes narrowed. "You've got some nerve, burdening us with childcare and household chores while demanding money. It's disgraceful." "It's not like that. I'm not making demands. It's just that without a little assistance, life is incredibly challenging. Perhaps you're not managing it well. Are you being careless with money?" Mother-in-law seemed oblivious to the reality. She had no idea that her own son was unemployed and spending all his time at the casino. I had been instructed to stay silent, but I was at my wit's end. "Do you know that Richard isn't bringing in a single cent? He's unemployed because he quit his job." "What are you implying?" "Richard has always been outstanding. Yes, he may have stumbled with his college entrance exams, but he landed a job at a reputable company afterward. He quit that job after just a month. Now, he's always at the casino. I can't sustain us on my savings alone." "That's absurd. Stop spouting nonsense." Mother-in-law vehemently rejected my claims. Her son, who had always been a star in sports and academics, was her pride and joy. The idea that he was now unemployed and squandering his time at the casino was too much for her to accept. Her face flushed with anger, mother-in-law stormed out of the room. When she returned with deliberate steps, I was taken aback to find her wielding a knife. "What are you intending to do? Please put it down," I pleaded, edging away while cradling my son. Mother-in-law closed in slowly, the blade held menacingly aloft. With a chilling precision, she brought the tip of the knife to my throat. "Enough of your insults toward my son. Having a wife like you is dragging Richard down. You're a lazy leech, surviving on a measly $70,000. Leave this house." Her harsh words sent shivers down my spine. Any sudden move could endanger my son. Seeing my silence and the fear etched on my face, mother-in-law seemed satisfied and lowered the knife. "But you understand. There's no place for parasites like you. Just keep quiet and tend to your chores," she spat before retreating to her room. Relieved of the immediate threat, I crumpled to the floor, my son's sobs echoing in the tense air. I comforted him with gentle strokes on his back, but inside, a resolve solidified. We couldn't remain in this house any longer. The casual threat of a knife was unfathomable. She seemed devoid of humanity. I had been swayed by Richard's honeyed words until now. After each argument, I felt compelled to stand by him, believing he'd crumble without me. But I had reached my breaking point. Above all, my maternal instinct screamed to shield my sobbing son in my arms. This environment was no place to raise him. The decision was made. We would leave the next day. In the morning, my mother-in-law's stern voice pierced the air. "Emily, please prepare for my husband's memorial service next week. All our relatives will be attending, so ensure everything is flawless," she commanded before hurrying off to a neighbor's house, leaving no room for my response. The following week marked my father-in-law's memorial service. Richard and my mother-in-law were discussing arrangements for a lavish feast and reminiscing about him. I was tasked with all the preparations, but I found myself mentally checked out. As soon as Richard and my mother-in-law stepped out, I hastily gathered my belongings and fled from their house. I didn't have much, just my clothes, my son's toys, and diapers. When I arrived at my parents' house, they were taken aback. However, as I poured out my heart to them, my mother was moved to tears and enveloped me in a tight embrace. My typically composed father was visibly enraged and instructed me to rest. Later that evening, the phone rang. It was undoubtedly Richard, wondering why I hadn't returned to prepare dinner. I disregarded the call and opted to block his number. The following day, mother-in-law and Richard arrived together at my parents' house, banging on the door in the early hours. Though my parents attempted to deter them, I insist they be allowed inside. As I swing the door open, they launch into a tirade immediately. "How could you vanish without a word? What kind of wife does that? Isn't it odd to disappear without a trace? Could you please lower your voices? You're disturbing the neighbors." I respond calmly, fighting the impulse to retort, "Who's the actual issue here?" Upon witnessing my firm stance, they attempt to seize me, but my father intervenes. "If you resort to violence, we'll call the authorities. Let's discuss this calmly inside first." With my parents by my side, I initiate the conversation with mother-in-law and Richard. "Why did you vanish without a word?" I was at my breaking point juggling childcare and my job, feeling utterly overwhelmed, yet you never offered a helping hand despite my pleas. "Well, I was occupied as well. Occupied at the casino, as I've mentioned before. Our son doesn't frequent the casino." "Stop spreading falsehoods," mother-in-law persisted, seemingly under the impression that Richard was still employed. "It's understandable, considering what a dutiful son he's always been." She likely held onto that belief. Sometimes ignorance is a blessing. "So, mother-in-law, where do you think Richard is currently employed?" "At a securities company. I've seen the job offer letter, remember?" "Well then, perhaps we should give them a call to confirm if Richard is still on their staff. That would settle the matter." "Hold on a moment," Richard interjected, clearly flustered. "What's the issue if I'm still employed there? It shouldn't be a problem." "Well, that's I hesitated, noticing Richard's visible discomfort, then dialed the securities company's number on my phone. Switching the call to speaker mode, I ensured everyone could hear as I inquired about Richard's employment status. That individual resigned several years ago, if memory serves me correctly. He was with us for just about a month. The voice from the phone left mother-in-law speechless. Richard, now looking down, clenched his fists. "Did you really quit?" "Why?" I pressed. "Because it was frustrating. Everything was just grunt work and the boss would yell at me for the smallest mistakes. It was harassment," Richard finally admitted. "Why haven't you kept us informed about your activities since then?" "I've been actively searching for a job." "For how long have you been on the hunt?" "It doesn't appear to be yielding any results." "Can you provide a count of how many companies you've applied to so I can verify?" "Well, the job market isn't exactly overflowing with great opportunities. I'm waiting for the right fit to come along." "You seem quite confident in your abilities. By the way, you're currently working part-time, correct? What was your income last month?" $700. $700. Didn't you claim to mother-in-law that Emily could barely make $700 and couldn't fend for herself, so you were the sole provider?" Apparently, he missiled mother-in-law, suggesting I wasn't bringing in anything, but the reality was quite different. As a dental hygienist, my salary isn't extravagant, but I was making at least $2,000. Upon learning the truth, mother-in-law flushed crimson with anger, shooting daggers at Richard. Faced with the reality, Richard erupted in fury. "Why must you do this? This is all you're doing, making me appear foolish." His pride evidently wounded, he couldn't bear the humiliation, slamming his fist on the table in frustration. "You shouldn't divulge such matters in public. It's defamation," I uttered in disbelief. "If you wish to pursue legal action, feel free, but I'll counter with a lawsuit for your knife threat as well." And let's not forget, lawsuits come with a hefty price tag. Do you have the funds? Richard retorted, clicking his tongue in frustration. It was likely he had squandered all his earnings at the casino. Meanwhile, mother-in-law remained in shock upon discovering the truth about Richard's unemployment. I've laid it all out for her. I'm the sole earner covering all our living expenses. When Richard and I wed, he promised to manage household duties and childcare in lieu of my job. But once married, he failed to fulfill any of those obligations. That contradicts what I've been told. Mother-in-law seemed to blindly trust whatever Richard fed her, right? She became agitated when I requested assistance with chores and childcare. She even resorted to brandishing a knife, commanding me to keep quiet and attend to my housework. I could see my mother-in-law's complexion draining. Standing before my parents, being confronted for her misconduct, she appeared uneasy. Mother-in-law, you haven't contributed a dime to the household either. We've relied solely on my income all this time. I have no intention of continuing to toil for you, so I'm requesting a divorce. Divorce? Hold on a moment. Don't just drop such bombshells out of nowhere. Yes, indeed. I'll pitch in as well, so please reconsider and return, they implored. No, thank you, I firmly reiterated, their surprise evident in widened eyes. It was likely a shock for them, accustomed to my usual compliance even amidst shouting or persistent pleas, to hear my unequivocal refusal this time. I refuse to live with someone who resorts to wielding a knife to assert dominance. I'm exhausted from sharing a roof with Richard, who spends his days gambling at the casino. I intend to seek compensation for all the labor I've contributed thus far, as well as child support. That's going to be quite a challenge. I simply can't afford such payments, mother-in-law protested. Well then, cease gambling immediately and start making payments, I countered. But I can't possibly do that. I'm unemployed. Richard's admission left me flabbergasted by his sheer lack of foresight. You're unemployed because you're too selective about the jobs you're willing to take. Do you have any idea what it means to be willing to do whatever it takes? There aren't many companies out there willing to hire someone with no significant qualifications or work experience. Don't take society for granted. Many people are out there working tirelessly in challenging conditions to make ends meet. Yet individuals who quit their jobs on a whim because they're upset or don't enjoy their work, nobody's going to be eager to hire them. He lectures, expressing doubt about Richard's ability to find employment given his current approach. I'll have my lawyer handle the divorce proceedings. Please refrain from contacting me in any way from now on. What about us? How can you be so selfish? What will become of us? Mother-in-law's anger flared at my statement. I'm not sure. Perhaps you should find a way to support yourself, I retorted, deliberately adopting a puzzled expression in response to her heated words. Heartless. I won't tolerate being called that by you. Remember when you referred to me, your daughter-in-law, as a leech surviving on a meager $700 a month? It was you who held a knife to my throat and demanded my silence. And by the way, the lazy individual earning $700 a month is sitting right beside you. Aren't you going to ask him to leave? As I spoke, mother-in-law trembled with rage. Perhaps I had pushed too far. Suddenly, she lunged forward, grabbing my collar. Stop it. I warned you, I'll call the police if you lay a hand on her. My father intervened forcefully, trying to pull her away, but she was too agitated to be restrained. So, not content with threats of a knife, now resorting to physical violence. Barbaric, wouldn't you agree it's best not to compound your offenses? I challenged mother-in-law, met with a resentful glare. Disregarding her, I turned my attention to Richard. I held on to hope that you would change, but I'm relinquishing that now. My priority is to protect our son. I won't burden you any longer. I'll handle the finances, the household chores, and childcare. Please come back. You'll handle the money? Really? Even with careful budgeting, it exceeds $1,000 a month. Can you manage that? Richard's complexion paled at my words. He had never earned more than $1,000 since quitting his job. But I have Mom's pension. So you're admitting you're relying on my pension now? Even my usually composed mother-in-law couldn't contain her frustration at Richard's absurd declaration. I don't have any other options. I'm unemployed. I've been doing some part-time work now, Richard replied defensively. Can't we attempt to resolve things? Mother-in-law interjected, hoping for reconciliation. Finally breaking his silence, my father addressed Richard sternly. Richard, you and your mother have taken undue advantage of our daughter. Had I known your true character, I would have vehemently opposed this marriage. I refuse to allow her back into your home. I'm cutting all ties with you. But I can't imagine life without Emily. Please grant me another chance, Richard pleaded desperately. Don't be ridiculous. Life without our daughter? Yet you're already relying on her. A man unwilling to strive for his own livelihood and to ensure his wife's well-being doesn't deserve our daughter. Leave at once. My father's voice carried an unusual edge, sending shivers down my spine. Richard knelt, head bowed, a pitiful sight devoid of the charm I once saw in him during our college days. Please reconsider, Emily. I'm begging you, Richard implored, his voice tinged with desperation. But my parents remained resolute. They had reached their limit. I refuse to be treated like a servant by the two of you any longer. Please refrain from involving me in anything moving forward, I asserted as we ushered them out of the house, swiftly locking the door behind them. For a while, they pounded on the door, shouted, but when a passing police officer intervened, they hastily fled. Afterward, I learned that Richard had been disowned by his mother and ejected from their home. He now resides in a dilapidated apartment, scraping by on welfare and sporadic part-time jobs. His volatile temper renders him unable to hold down any job for long, leading to a revolving door of positions at convenience stores, construction sites, and the like. Financial strain weighs heavily on him. In his efforts to meet his obligations for compensation and child support, Richard juggles multiple part-time jobs, leaving little room to pursue full-time employment. Rumors circulate that he still frequents the casino and may even be in debt. However, I pay little mind to such hearsay. News of Richard's downfall spreads rapidly among our former high school peers, prompting numerous sightings and updates. Reports of his eviction by his mother and their frequent altercations become common knowledge. His unemployment and abandonment by his wife become public gossip. Undoubtedly, his mother feels a deep sense of embarrassment after years of boasting about her son's achievements. She seldom ventures outside now. With the unwavering support of my parents in managing household duties and caring for my son, I continue to work. I now enjoy more quality time with my son, no longer needing to rely on daycare services. My parents' assistance has provided me with newfound freedom and stability. Taking care of him has made everything so much better. I only wish I had initiated the divorce sooner. Moving forward, I'm determined to cherish every moment I spend with my son and witness his growth up close. You're saying you can't go on the trip I planned. If you don't come, you're no longer family. It's common sense since you married my son, isn't it? I am my mother-in-law, said to me, seeking agreement from Cody. I halted Cody, who seemed like he wanted to say something, and reluctantly consented to her proposal. Goodness, marrying someone so naive to the world is such a hassle. As long as you understand, if you don't come, it's divorce. I'll re-educate you from now on, she continued with her ridiculous remarks. I was sick of it, but little did I know, this would be the last trip with my in-laws. I'm Liliana, 32 years old, and I run an app development company. It's still a small venture, but I love my work and every day is a joy. My husband Cody is 37, 5 years older than me, and works at a bank. Both of us are passionate about our work, often discussing it for hours until the early morning. Cody is very understanding of my work and we share household chores. Despite being married for 4 years, we don't have kids yet, but we both like children and hope to have them someday. My family runs an auto parts factory founded by my dad. It's now managed by my brother, which gives me the freedom to pursue my dream of starting my own app company. Even though our industries differ, I often consult with my supportive brother and dad, making my family a significant pillar in my life. Cody's family runs a small factory, and as an only child, Cody was expected to take over. However, he chose banking instead, much to his parents' disappointment. There were valid reasons for his decision. Firstly, the factory wasn't thriving, and Andy, his father, was considering shutting it down. Running a small factory is tough nowadays. As a child, Cody often heard his father talking with bank employees over the phone. Once he met a kind and cool banker during a visit to the factory and started accompanying his father to the bank for meetings just to meet him. Eventually, Cody aspired to be a banker, studied hard, and now works at a major bank. Our marriage seems fine on the surface, but it's not going well. Faye doesn't think highly of my job since I can work remotely. There are days I work from home, but she sees it as a frivolous job and doesn't understand it at all. I get it, for an older generation like our parents, my job is hard to grasp. It's not physically demanding, but it's still work and it can be exhausting. I always adjust my work schedule around the in-laws' plans so I never inconvenience them. I don't insist on them understanding, but it's frustrating when they think remote work is easy just because I have a flexible schedule. There are other things Effie disapproves of about us. We built our house when we got married, located about halfway between our parents' homes. Despite taking different routes, it takes less than 30 minutes to reach either house. As a dual-income couple, we manage our spending and savings separately. We value our independence and privacy even as a couple. We contribute a fixed amount for living expenses every month, save the rest for the house, and manage our own money. Otherwise, Effie disapproves of this lifestyle too. She thinks it's wrong for a couple to talk about privacy. According to her, it's odd for family members to have secrets, and she doesn't consider them a true family. I think because Effie doesn't like me, she finds fault in everything I do. She adores her son Cody, so I'm just a nuisance to her. Every time we meet, she makes snide remarks about us not having children yet. It's something I'm sensitive about, and I'd rather not be reminded. Childbearing is a delicate topic, and usually it's polite to avoid it, but Effie brings it up every time, so I've started to avoid her to not worry Cody. I've been staying late at work on purpose to avoid meeting her. Effie has done many other surprising things, but there was one incident I couldn't forgive. It happened on the day of my best friend's wedding. After her wedding, my friend was moving abroad, and we wouldn't be able to meet as often since we both work. I was really looking forward to celebrating her big day. However, a week before the wedding, Andy came to me with a request. He had an important business reception and wanted me there. I naturally refused. The only thing more important than my friend's wedding would be a parent on their deathbed. That night, something unexpected happened. When I got home from work, my in-laws were at our house. As soon as she saw me, Effie confronted me angrily. "Liliana, what are you thinking? Refusing Andy's request is outrageous. You're my son's wife. It's only natural to prioritize family obligations. Your refusal is unacceptable. You need to rethink your priorities," she yelled at me. Cody was there too, but he said nothing. After asking, I found out the reception was critical for the future of the company. But to me, my best friend's wedding was just as important. I told Effie that I understand what you both are saying, but my best friend's wedding is an important event for me, and I don't want to miss it. Besides, I'm not even an employee of Andy's company. As I said this, even Cody chimed in. "Can't you make an exception this time? This is really about the survival of the company. I'm going to, and it's a family effort. We can make it up to you for missing the wedding. It's a family crisis. Can't you help us?" I was shocked. I never thought Cody would say such a thing. He knew how much I was looking forward to the wedding. Then Andy spoke. I understood Liliana's point, but this time, we really needed her help. The atmosphere made it hard for me to refuse. It wasn't just any reception. In the end, I reluctantly agreed to skip my best friend's wedding. I told my friend the truth and explained why I couldn't come. Given that I had previously talked to my best friend about my family situation, she understood my predicament. In fact, she was more concerned about me. I'm fortunate to have such a kind friend. I felt guilty for missing her big day, but once the decision was made, I had to focus on making the reception a success. On the day of the event, Cody and I arrived at the venue early and tried to contact Effie. However, for some reason, Effie didn't answer her phone. As I worried about what to do, the in-laws finally arrived at the venue just 10 minutes before it was set to start. To my surprise, they were in a disheveled state, with messy hair and their suits and shirts all wrinkled. I was shocked and asked Effie what happened. "What's with your shirt? Today is an important reception, right?" She awkwardly responded, "I just overslept, Liliana. Make sure you're not rude." I was so close to snapping back with, "I don't want to hear that from you," but somehow I managed to hold back. I really want to give myself credit for keeping my composure during the reception. Effie, not knowing how to converse properly, made a series of rude comments to our guests. It seemed she meant them as jokes, but their strained smiles made it clear they weren't received well. As expected, we didn't secure the contract, and the reception ended without success. I thought to myself that it was to be expected. If I had known it would be like this, I would have preferred to go to my best friend's wedding. I was infuriated at being dragged into such a disastrous reception, ruining my plans and causing issues with the in-laws. To my dismay, they didn't acknowledge any wrongdoing. According to them, after such a lavish reception with no contract, it's almost like dealing with con artists. Good thing we didn't make a deal with such strange people. I was speechless with astonishment. How can they be so blissfully unaware? After this incident, I became even more uncomfortable with my in-laws and started avoiding them. But unfortunately, there's something I can't avoid. Cody's family has a tradition of going on a family trip every year since his childhood, and it has continued even after we got married. Since our marriage, I've been expected to join these trips, but I'm always stuck with the chores and driving, arranging hotels, booking, researching tourist spots. All these tedious tasks are my responsibility, and if I dare to voice my opinion, I'm immediately shut down with "don't overstep." Even when we visit tourist spots, I'm often left to stay in the room, never getting to visit places I like. Honestly, I dread these annual family trips and always hope I might fall ill on the day. Now, this year's trip season has arrived. Despite their claims of being financially tight, my in-laws insist on a lavish trip as usual. I was tasked with finding the hotel. I planned meticulously to keep Effie, who's always complaining, in a good mood. Since I'm the only one who doesn't drink, I'm the default driver, but I don't mind as it spares me from their conversations. However, a crisis occurred just before the trip. I received news that my mom had collapsed and was in critical condition. In such a situation, going on a trip, even a short one, was out of the question. I lost my composure, thinking I needed to see my mom as soon as possible. It was the day before the trip, so I decided to cancel and started preparing to go to the hospital. Cody offered to come to the hospital with me, but I refused. I felt like he was implying my mom wouldn't make it, which I didn't want to hear. When Cody and I went to tell Effie we couldn't join the trip, she exploded in anger. "You're saying you can't go on the trip I planned. If you don't come, you're no longer family. As my son's wife, it's common sense to prioritize the family trip, right?" "Right, Cody?" Effie said, seeking agreement from Cody. Effie interrupted Cody, who looked like he wanted to say something, as if to say she wouldn't entertain any opposing opinions. In that situation, I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't find the words to speak. Nothing could be more important than being with my mom in her critical condition. Just as I was about to respond, my brother called. It seems mom's condition is serious but a bit stable. I expressed my desire to rush to her, but he said visiting isn't possible right now due to a contagious disease outbreak. He mentioned that if she recovers, we could arrange a short visit later, so there was no point in coming immediately. Hearing this, I hesitated about what to do. Noticing my indecision, my brother asked what was wrong. I honestly explained the situation about the trip and my current dilemma to my brother. A bit angry, he made a good suggestion I hadn't thought of in my distress. The trip destination was near my parents' home. He assured me that I could quickly get to my family's house from the hotel if needed, and there shouldn't be any problem. Indeed, that's true. If I can't visit the hospital, staying at home or at the hotel doesn't make much difference. Accepting my brother's suggestion, I told Effie, "All right, I'll go on the trip." Effie responded, "Goodness, if you had said that from the start, I wouldn't have had to get angry. It's hard to marry someone so naive. As long as you understand, if you don't come, it's divorce. Honestly, I'll have to re-educate you from now on." Cody looked surprised, but we agreed to go on the condition that I could leave for the hospital if needed. He remarked, "It would be trouble if our driver suddenly disappeared, right?" "Oh, good, you're part of this family now, so our needs come first. Remember your role as my son's wife. This is a major event. The family trip should be your top priority." Her triumphant attitude and obvious excitement really irked me. But to avoid further trouble, I decided to endure it. On the day of the trip, I was so worried about Mom that I couldn't put down my phone. Yet Effie was drinking beer from the morning. The back seat of my car, which I was driving, turned into a party scene. I was surprised to see Cody joining in the drinking. However, this was a trip for which everyone had rearranged their schedules. I told myself that it would be nice if everyone could enjoy the trip since we had all made the effort to come. During the trip, Effie's whims were relentless demands to stop for the bathroom immediately or to go to the grocery store for more alcohol. I felt like a servant, but I was prepared to endure such things. That's when my mobile phone rang. It was a call from my brother, thankfully informing me that Mom had survived. Her condition had stabilized and she had regained consciousness. The diagnosis was subarachnoid hemorrhage. However, I couldn't be completely at ease yet. There were concerns about potential after effects. It was reassuring to have my brother keeping me updated as I was feeling anxious. When I shared the news of Mom's recovery with my in-laws, Effie commented, "If she's better, there's no need to bother us with such news. You're making a big deal out of nothing." And then Andy added, Exactly, no need to spoil our trip with such grim news. We're supposed to be enjoying ourselves. I was disgusted that Andy shared Effie's view and didn't want to think of these people as my family. During the trip, they made a ruckus in the hotel, drinking and partying, which was truly embarrassing. This incident deepened my distrust of my in-laws. Thankfully, Mom's condition remained stable, and there was no need to rush to the hospital, allowing us to complete the trip and return home. I was relieved. While I was sorting out the laundry, Effie came to our house. Wondering what it could be this time, she said, "You have a dryer at your house, right?" "We don't have one, so let me use it," and showed up with loads of laundry. I was exasperated and replied, "There's a laundromat with dryers. I have a load of laundry of my own, and I'm using it right now, so it's not possible." To which she retorted, always so stingy, "Once you're done, it's fine. I'll come to pick it up tomorrow. Leave it finished by then," and attempted to leave her laundry in our washroom. Cody stepped in. "Go to a laundromat. Liliana is tired, and she has to work tomorrow. It's not possible." Effie got angry, feeling her son was defending me. She left in a hurry, spewing insults and slamming the door, leaving the laundry behind. In hindsight, if things had been different that day, maybe the course of events would have changed. Later, Effie returned and said, "During the trip, I realized something, Liliana. You lack awareness of being married to Cody. We might face similar situations in the future. Since we couldn't discuss it, I've decided that Liliana should make a decision." She put a family contract and divorce papers on the table. I was speechless. What even is a family contract? It was ridiculous and confirmed my belief that she can't have a normal conversation. The saving grace was Cody's reaction. He said, "I have something to say. If you keep imposing your biased views on us, I'll cut ties. I can't deal with this anymore." "What do you think, Liliana? She's not your servant or housekeeper. You're the one who's mistaken about your position." Effie was stunned. Until now, Cody had hardly ever opposed anything. It wasn't because he agreed with Effie's ideas, but rather he kept quiet to avoid the hassle. Following Cody's words, Effie's anger turned towards me. "You've changed Cody since marrying him. He used to be so sweet. It's crazy for him to talk to me like that. You must have brainwashed him. Turn him back to the old Cody," she accused, confronting me. She believed I had supposedly brainwashed Cody into defying her. But then Cody spoke up for me. "The one doing the brainwashing is you, right? Always going on a rampage without listening to anyone's opinion. Frankly, you're a toxic parent. You never let me do what I wanted to after getting married. Instead of calming down, you started spewing your venom at Liliana. Enough is enough. I'm not going to divorce, and if you have a problem, you should stay out of our lives," Cody said. Hearing this, Effie turned to Andy, who was with her, and burst into tears. Andy responded, "If that's what Cody thinks, then fine. We'll cut ties, do whatever you want," and stormed out. I was surprised but happy that Cody stood up for us like that. Feeling frustrated, I told my brother about this. He became furious, saying he couldn't stay silent if they were acting this way. He decided to take action. It led to a tragedy in the in-laws' family. Turns out, my brother's company was a client of my in-laws' company. We had kept our family's company name a secret to avoid creating a power imbalance. The in-laws had no idea they were dealing with my family's company. But with things as they were, we couldn't continue like this. Though I had been patient, avoiding mixing business and personal matters, it had reached its limit. My brother had been having issues with them not meeting deadlines. "You can't cherish those who don't cherish you," he said. I discussed it with Cody before talking to the in-laws, and he agreed. Cody also said he had had enough. My brother ended the contract with the in-laws company. It was a business decision. They had been a problematic company, not paying on time and missing deadlines. But we had tolerated it because it was Cody's family's business. But there was no longer a need for that. Later, when my in-laws found out about this, they came to us in tears. Now they're constantly apologizing. They pleaded with my brother to reconsider the contract, but of course, that was impossible. It was their responsibility for not meeting deadlines. They should have been grateful for our patience. Cody explained everything to his parents, but they refused to accept it and ended up cutting ties in a rage. Cody wasn't sad. He felt relieved. He had been torn and tired, struggling between us and his family. Since then, we've been living peacefully. I learned that Cody had been supporting his family financially, but he stopped that. Now the in-laws factory went bankrupt. Even without this incident, it was on the brink of closure, drowning in debt. I heard that Cody had been paying for those annual trips, and it's astonishing how they could behave that way, using someone else's money. Now the in-laws are living modestly, and Effie has recently started working. I was honestly surprised to see her, who used to call herself a president's wife, working. One day I saw Effie being scolded while doing a cleaning job. I felt bad for thinking this was karma. She'll learn the harsh realities of society and hopefully straighten out. As for us, work is going well. We haven't had children yet, but we enjoy our jobs and life is fulfilling. We're planning an overseas trip for our next vacation. For a while, we're thinking of enjoying life without children.